Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Coding Tuesday. Today, my name is Mikkel, by the way, as it says
And
down
welcome to
over here, I think.
Today, my name is Mikkel, by the way, as it says. And welcome to over here.
We got some audio feedback going on.
Today, my name is Mikkel, by the way, as it says. And welcome to over here.
We got some audio feedback going on. Let's get that fixed. I think we're there now. Awesome. So, hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mikkel, and this is the Fermyon Live Coding Tuesdays. And together with me today is Ben from the Leptos project. Hello, Ben. We have you muted at this point, Ben.
There we go.
We have you muted.
Although I'm still hearing double of you, which might be me.
There we go.
If you... Okay, I think so. Ben wants to get his audio fixed, and then as soon as Ben will be back and have the audio fixed, we can hopefully get going. But thanks everyone for coming here. A few weeks back, Ben and I also met and talked about Leptos and did some introductions. We had some unfortunate connectivity issues at that point. We hope we're not going to have that today. Hey, Ben, thanks. And I guess the audio thing should be fixed by now.
Yeah, I think I probably had the YouTube tab open in one of my many tabs.
Cool. So anyway, so we wanted to give this a second chance. And I know in between, Ben, you've been super busy building a lot of stuff with Leptos and Spin. And basically, we want to walk through that today, or you want to walk through that with us today. And so the way that this goes, feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll pick those up. And Ben, yeah, do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself and then maybe something about the project you've been doing?
Sure. So my name is Ben Wishovich. I am a software engineer primarily focused on Rust and Rust on the web. And most recently, for the last couple of years now, I think, I've been helping to maintain Leptos, which is a front-end web framework, or I guess I should say a full-stack web framework. The likes of Solid.js or Vue or React. And I've been doing a lot of work recently making that play nicely with, making Leptos play nicely with Fermyon. And Fermyon has some interesting quirks that have been fun. So I think we're actually at the point now where it's ready for people to test and tell me what other things I've gotten wrong. So I'm really excited for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, a fun little anecdote. I was at a meetup. I don't remember if this was last week or the week before, but anyways, and I was showing a Leptos and Spin integration sample, and sort of, hey, you can do Rust all the way. Like front end could be Rust, back end could be Rust, but we could also do the fun stuff of putting JavaScript on the back end and Rust on the front end with the Leptos and Spin integration. So if that's what you're looking for, here's your opportunity to test that out and see if that becomes a trend. But yeah, so Ben, I know you. I know part of what you've been doing is you have a blog, and you have been working on porting that blog over to using the Spin integration in Leptos. You want to tell us about that?
For sure. I have been porting my blog over to Spin, and it's been a little bit of a struggle. And I'd certainly love to talk about that a little bit. But first, I thought we could kind of experience what building a blog is like with Spin Live. And I prepared that setup for us. So yeah, I think it'll give us a good intro to Leptos, and it'll give you something to look at while I attempt to explain Leptos topics in a more coherent manner. So
go ahead and share the screen.
Yeah, let's set that up. As soon as I find this. Okay. Sent.
By the way, Sohan, who usually runs the stream, is out on holiday vacation this week. So please bear over with me for having to be the control room guy and everything during this. Hope things work out.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Okay. So we've built a couple of different integrations for Leptos and Fermyon. The one that Fermyon maintains and kind of the one that we've set up on our end. And I'm going to start with this one here. So for those of you, let me put this link in our StreamYard chat, and maybe he can share it with y'all. But basically, if you've installed Rust and you've installed the targets and you've installed the Spin API, then you can just run a cargo generate on here, and you'll get a project that will actually deploy to Spin. Do you have a good sense of whether this text is large enough or whether I should make it bigger, Mikkel?
Let's see what comments come in through the chat, because I have so many windows open. Let me just go full screen and see this.
Oops.
I think it might be okay if you can zoom a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
People want bigger text.
They usually do, right?
Yes.
Let's start with that, and then we'll see how it goes. So let's call this Leptos Fermyon blog. Sure, whatever. And then, if you look in here, you can kind of see that I haven't gone into the folder yet. Fermyon blog. If you look in here, you can kind of see the structure, right? We've got, it looks like a regular crate. We've got the source folder with all of our files in it. We've got the spin.toml, which configures Spin and Fermyon for cloud. And then we've got other things that I don't need to talk about. And if I start the build here, in theory, this should just work. I did try this, but with my luck lately, something has to break.
Yeah, you never know when doing these live demos.
Technology.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to do a little bit more work. One of the pain points, here's one of the pain points. You need to make sure that the Wasm bindgen version exactly matches the one that we're using. So we'll do that real quick here and run it again. But one of the things that I've been noticing is that how the Spin CLI works is a little bit clunky because there's only one build command. And we can do a bunch of optimizations to make dev builds faster, but only if we can do multiple build commands. So I've been looking at how to do that with Spin or integrating Spin into our build tool a little bit. But bear with me a second here. It'll get there.
Yeah, mainly I think the Spin build command is sort of a convenience around how you would build your WebAssembly module, right? That you would need to serve. And I have actually seen various scenarios where people point the Spin build command to a script, an external script, so they could imply some logic in there. I'm not sure if it can forward arguments if you did that with a script.
Okay.
But that is not an uncommon pattern if you have to do a little bit more complicated build setup than just running a single or two commands.
I might have to look into doing that. We're already calling out to cargo Leptos directly. Kill it. Try that again. And that does a bunch of setup that makes things a little bit easier for us. But hopefully, there we go. So if we look at our demo here, we've got our basic clicker, right? And if I click this bunch of times, it'll update itself and and everything will look nice. But let's say that we want to build a blog, right? Let's build a blog. So kind of on the most basic end, right? The blog is a way to add posts and a way to view posts, right? So we can add a way to add posts, but first let's make a new page here. If you check this out, we're in the pages folder here, which is included automatically in the source pages here. Mm-hmm. And I can make a new page like blog.rs, for example. And then, we can code it out, give it some flesh here. In Leptos, a component or a page, I guess all pages are components or collections of components. But we can have a blog page here, which are functions that return impl into view. Let's see if I can type.
By the way, a Leptos component is not the same as a WebAssembly component, neither as a Spin component. There's a lot of components floating around here, but we can maybe open that box a little bit later, but yeah.
Component is such a popular word at this point, right? And inside your components, you typically got whatever your Rust logic is at the top, and then you've got our view macro, which I can just put in regular HTML here. And before I do that, I'm going to add it. Going to add it to the not that one. The lib page here. On pages. Need to add it to the route. Let's see where that is. We're in pages. See, I should do that in. Now, normally I have a mod.rs file, and that's because it's right there. Hub mod blog. All right, well, we'll come back to that. Let's see, and then blog, which pages? It didn't save, so I guess I'm gonna have to type this again. Okay. We'll speed through this here. Hey, it remembered. Save. There we go. So now we can go to the blog. All right, so now it's in here, and you get some warning about doc comments that I need to investigate, but it basically works, right? So inside of our view macro, one of the things I like about Leptos coming from like a React world, right, is that you can write just boring old HTML in here pretty painlessly. And if we look, I'm going to open up Spin Watch over here, and hopefully we should see this update, and this page may or may not be visible yet, but we'll give that a second here. That's the basic view of a project of a page in Leptos, right? So if I go to blog here,
there you go.
I will realize that I'm in the wrong folder.
Oh, it's my best blog, not just my blog. Here you go.
Well, that's because I opened the one that I did to test this instead of the one that we're building here. Yeah. So I'm actually expecting this to return an error in a second. So we'll see.
I like demos where you start out erroring things and then you sort of walk back and troubleshoot a little bit, and you usually learn a lot from that. even by watching. Yeah.
Okay. So, we couldn't find the page, right? And the reason we can't find the page is we haven't added a route for it. The way that the Fermyon Leptos integration works is that it basically forwards almost all pages to the Leptos router, which in this template is in source/routes. And you can kind of see it here is component based. If you've used the solid.js router, this is going to be pretty similar to what you would expect. But to make this work, all we should have to do is add a path here, /blog, and then we'll add a blog Yeah, sure. Or we won't. Oh, it added it. Good. And we'll add a blog here. So we imported it up at the top with the other components. We added the component name here. Reload this. And I forgot the closing tag, which Rust definitely cares about. Give it a second here. Hopefully we should see something in this route instead of couldn't find that page.
So there is a question from Adam Sabatka about whether this introduces page-based routing. And I guess what you're showing here is page-based routing. All the routes need to be defined in the server file. I'm not sure if the server file is referenced to a Leptos file or the Spin file, but I don't know, Adam, you might be able to clarify your question.
So the server file in this is basically the equivalent of the main file in one of our other integrations that's a little more traditional, right? So we create routes here. We create the route table here, but we don't really create routes here other than the server function prefix routes, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the routes for this page, if I can manage to navigate, whoops, there we go, are in the router page here. Okay. So now, if we save this, run it, it already said we couldn't find the page, so I'm off to a great start. But this is roughly how you do it. Let's see if it comes back on reload. Huh. There we go.
There you go.
I forgot that slash on the end of the route is now different than not slash on the end of the route, which is something we changed somewhat recently to make porting some JS sites and PHP sites over a little easier. But here we've got our my blog page, it's at the /blog route, and that's pretty good. But, it's not a really interesting blog without posts, right?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite features I love to say about Leptos is server functions. And server functions are basically the idea that we can run functions from the client as if they were running on the servers themselves. So for something that's server rendered here, where most of the stuff is generated on the server and then some things are streamed down in bits and slotted into the client as they complete, this can be a little tricky, but we're gonna do this here. So first off, let's make a folder. I like to put my functions in my server functions in a separate functions folder. Not everybody does. Some people will try to co-locate their functions with their components, but that's not me. So we'll create a mod.rs in here, and we'll preemptively add a blog page, and we'll make it public. And then we can get even smaller and add a blog.rs page here. And then in theory, we've got a blog page. So server functions are a little bit different. Actually, hold on. Before we do that, let's add functions to the lib here. Okay, blog page. So the way you define a server function, right, is that you use the server macro on a regular REST function, right? So a really basic blog has two functions, right? It has a way to get a post and a way to make a post. And server functions, unlike components that return impl into view, these ones return result, whatever type you want here, and then server function error, which is also defined in the Leptos crate. But instead, T is obviously not a type, so we'll just return, let's say our post will be string for now.
At least that's a good starting point for a blog post.
You can always make it more complicated, right?
Add pictures and stuff like that, but yeah.
Yeah. And then the other function we're going to need, right, is add post. This one can return nothing except and we can do it like that. Okay. So I'm not as familiar with the Spin SDK as some of you probably are. So I'm going to go to the existing server functions in, I believe it's right here. Let's see if I can find them. Yep. And I'm going to snag the store creation and the store API here. And we'll put that.
I would have done the same thing, even though I'm supposed to be familiar with that API, but yes.
So Fermyon Cloud and Spin, and maybe the self-hosted version, I wouldn't really know because I haven't tried that yet, have a easy way to create a key value store in both the local version and the server version. And we can access that using the Spin SDK, which we've defined here. Open the default store. We don't even need to pass this through state, which is something we often have to do for other databases that pass around a pool of ARC handles or whatever. But this one, I just call it here. And we don't want to count, though. We want to post. It's going to be a string here. And let's get a little more complicated. Let's add a parameter here. What if we, for our key, we use a slug here, and then we can just pass the slug to the store here. Yep. That's interesting.
Do you need to use the Spin SDK in the file?
It's defined. I mean, it's included in the cargo toml, and it's defined here.
Oh,
so I'm going.
Yeah, it's qualified.
So maybe I'll comment. Oops, that's not the right kind of comment. Maybe I'll comment that out and see if it's a little bit happier. Expected async. Server functions are async functions.
There you go.
There we go. Now it's happy, except I'm not returning the type. But we can do that. Oops. Just return the post. And it should be happy, right? Somewhat happy. I think that's a clippy lint that I'm going to ignore for now. And then let's add a post, right? So we'll come back to this here. The things we'll need to add a post, right? We need our slug. And then we need some content. What is a blog without content? And then I'm going to do a similar thing here. Pull in the store. And then let me see, Spin SDK.
I think directly on the store you can do set JSON if you just want to.
That'd be handier. Yes, That's right. That's what I did.
I do remember some of the API though.
We can pass it the slug and the content, and I can't remember if that can error. And this needs to be an async function.
I think it does return a result. At least.
And this is supposed to be a reference, not a string here. And then we can return, if that gets through without failing, we can return OK. And yellow error or yellow warning. What is the yellow warning? It's a result. OK. So we should just do that there. And now it's telling me that whatever the error type that set JSON returns.
You need to get it back to the server function arrow.
And yeah, so we need to map this to an error type that we understand.
You could copy paste the line above.
We can make a new server function error here. We added a handy method for this. This takes a closure, it takes the error, and then we can do E here. And I think it will be happy now. Other than the fact that you don't really need this closure, you can just put server function error : new.
Okay.
And yeah, now we have both a way to add a post and a way to get a post. And those things probably work. We'll find out when we try to use them here. So now we can go back to our blog page. And this is where things start to get a little bit tricky, because the way streaming works, right? The way the SSR with hydration works and the way the Leptos works by default is that it will start these requests on the server and then it will stream them down to the client once they're complete, right? So there's a loading state involved. And because there's a loading state involved, we kind of have to do a little bit of additional boilerplate to manage that loading state. And the way that you do that for things that load on page load in Leptos is to use a resource here. And a resource is basically a way to track the state of that async function as it's going through its life cycle. And a resource takes two arguments. The first one is the dependencies to the resource or the things that cause it to retrigger, right? So we're getting a post. Maybe you want to reload the posts if somebody edits a post, right? If that was true here, I could put in, if I had defined an edit post resource of some kind, I could put that in the first one here, and it would, reload the posts whenever that happens. But we didn't do that. So we need to import the function here. Create functions blog, get post, right? Because we want to get a post. And then we can put in get post here. And this is going to complain. Let's see what we got. Well, it's complaining for a few different reasons. The first one is that because we added an argument to get post, right, we need to add that argument here. Otherwise, it's not really a valid Rust function, right? We need to know what the slug is when we go to this page. So that route probably isn't going to work for us here. So if we go to routes, we can see we've defined this as /blog, but we probably want something like :slug. And that adds a path param to Leptos that we can get later that will tell us, hey, if you navigate to /blog/foo, slug will be foo, we can get it, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, oops. Nope. Okay. We'll go back to the blog. So the way to do this part is a little bit tricky. And I'm going to pull up my notes here so that I don't confuse you all, because I don't have this part memorized.
No worries.
Okay.
So for folks joining right now, we are being visited by Ben, who is building out a blog using Leptos and the Spin integration. And right now we're working on creating a blog page and adding the server functions that will basically store and get our blogs from a key value store that is implemented by the Spin host.
Okay. So here we go. So because we're in Rust and people in Rust love to be exact, right? We don't do any kind of random struct or path slug path param value. We actually want you to define a struct which contains the options that, I'll come back to that, the options that we're extracting, right? So we, in this path, we are going to have a slug param, path param, and it's going to be a string. I guess I'll make that public too. And the way that this works is that we're going to derive a few different things on here. The most interesting one here is params, which sets up this logic for us. Let's see how that does. Yeah. We need to import params, which isn't in the Leptos crate. It is in the Leptos router crate. We have a few different crates that make this possible. We've seen the Leptos one, but we've got a Leptos_router crate that holds the router. We've got the Leptos_meta crate, which holds things like meta tags and script tags and fun convenience features like that. And then we've got a few different integration and macro crates that do other things. But this one's in there. Okay, so this part is happy at least. We've got our path params. But now we need to edit our resource so that we get those path params. So let's do that. So the way this typically works, right, is anything you want to have, anything you return in the first closure is going to be passed to the second closure here. So for view's sake here, there's nothing in there right now, but there could be, and there will be in just a sec. So we put the params so that you can access them into the context, which is basically this kind of nebulous global store that can hold all sorts of things, and that you sort what things you get by the type. So we're going to say we want to get the path params out of the params store, and it's not going to be able to find use params because I haven't imported that either. That is also in the router. Okay. So if you look at the return type from params, you can kind of see the way it's structured. We've got a memo, which is a type that holds other types that will only notify the types that are listening to it, the effects that are listening to it, if that thing changes. So if we go from /foo to /foo, this won't change, right? And that's pretty convenient.
Yeah. Okay.
So in here, we'll access that. It's a signal, which means we'll call get on it, which clones and returns the current value of the signal. And then the current value of the signal should be the result path params here. Although a thought occurs to me now that if we look at our functions here, what happens if the post is, if it successfully doesn't find the post, right? I don't really think that qualifies as an error. An error might be that the server is broken for some reason. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to nest these types a little bit and return a result option string here. So if we get an OK none, that just means that it wasn't found.
Yeah, and I actually think the KV API does the same, right? I think you can see that in the getJSON function up there. That even though that the key is not found, you just get an option of none, right?
Yeah.
Or you get a result of none. Well,
I guess the blog page.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. It's empty. There's nothing in there. It's not an error.
I'm sure we're going to get to see that in a minute here.
Yep.
So now we know that this is a result. So we'll give it, I think, OK, right? Which my notes is telling me is wrong. So I'm just going to stick with my notes here so I don't have to think too much. So we'll get our post out of here. And then we'll get our slug. And then I will commit some crimes. Because it's actually a double nested option, I think.
Yeah.
Now that we've got the slug out of the path params, in our last closure here, we can give it a named parameter that we can then pass to get post, right?
Nice.
And now it's telling me that I can again replace this closure with just get post, which I'm not going to do because this is a little cleaner. Okay, right. So now we've got our post.
All we've done here is like we took that parameter.
Uh-huh.
Well, all we did, like I'm making it sound simple, but basically we're wiring up the whole thing. So when we navigate to blog/something, whatever that /something is, we can now carry over and use as a parameter when calling the function, and basically use that as a key in our key value store to find the text, the string that is going to be the blog content.
Exactly. Now, this is where another fun part of the boilerplate comes in. Only one more, I promise. But first, let's see what happens if I try to put this in here. I don't know. Let's do p tag. In the view macro, we've got a regular HTML, and we've got our things in curly brackets, which is Rust. If you're familiar with JSX, this is basically JSX, but Rust. So I tend to call it RSX. And we can do post.get here. We can see what this does. Let's see if it's actually, give it a second to compile.
So post is a reference back to the resource we created, right? And get is basically getting whatever is value is in that resource right now. So
Leptos is built on signals, right? .get is the way to clone and return the value of a signal. And I'll make it a little clearer here. Post res. And then, yeah, let's see what that gives us. Blog is nothing. And foo. Can't find the page. Is that because I didn't save this page or the other page? Let that compile again. I should probably turn on autosave, but then it runs the compile whenever I autosave. And right now that takes a while.
Yeah. I actually think that's the reason why I also turned off autosave, and it bites me every time. It's like we have this I actually think this was changed in Spin recently, but there used to be this pattern where you could do spin up or even spin deploy if you deployed it somewhere without doing a build. So you sat in this loop of trying to figure out why things didn't work, and you basically didn't build before deploying or running things. But I think we changed something in Spin to make that a default now.
So it's compiled, and we can see on our page it returns. Oops. Excuse me. It returns an empty page again. And for those of you who are following along, you might wonder, hey, he was talking about how there are different states and we need to tell it what to display, during that state, right? So we haven't done that. And to do that, we need to use another of Leptos's components to make this possible. There are a couple of them, but the one I'm going to use today is called suspense. And what suspense does is basically when it's loading, it will display the fallback. So we can display loading, right? But
I like the name of the macro.
I wish I could say
what's happening?
Right?
Yeah.
I wish I could say it's original, but I think React beat us to the name. I'd have to check.
Oh, okay.
There's a thing called React Suspense, which does a similar thing.
Nice.
And then we will move this up here. And it's still not going to work, but I will tell you why. So now we've got what happens when it's loading, right? But we're not handling what happens when the function status changes, right? It could be an error, it could be, whatever. And we need to tell Leptos how to do that. And let me take a quick gander at my notes again. See how I did this. Right. Okay. Because it's always a little difficult to remember. So inside, the reason that we have so many closures in this language, in this setup, right, is so that we can subscribe that closure to the value of a signal. And we can say, if this signal changes, we want to reload this part. And that's one of the big differences between React and a fine-grained framework like Leptos, is that when this whole component is only going to run once, like we're never going to re-render this whole component unless you like reload the page or something. But when this resource state changes, when post_rest changes, we're going to reload this stuff, right? So we've got our little move closure here. Oops. And we're going to access the value of our resource up here. So post_rest.get, because it's a signal, we're going to get the value of the signal, just like we did with params. And then we're going to map it, I think, which takes another closure to our post. And I'm going to take a quick look at this so I don't confuse myself again. My Rust analyzer is a little bit tricky. It's not as well tuned as some of the ones that other people have. I need to work on that. But we're going to match on that. And we're going to say, if this is okay, sum p, right? Because we return a result option post. We're going to show a view macro that's basically this. Well, that didn't listen to me. Except we're going to put p here because that's the value we got out of there. Okay. And then bad. If it's none, we should return a value for that, right? We should say something like maybe a span this time. Post not found. And then if it's an error, well, you've got other problems.
Yeah.
You can do. Gonna be extremely lazy there. Okay. And then you run into one of the other quirks of Leptos. If we look at the error here, actually, this isn't a quirk of Leptos. This is a quirk of Rust, right? The view macro converts this HTML into types that represent elements. And if you look here, you can kind of see that one of these is returning a p element and the other two are returning a span element. So we kind of need to unify that. So we're going to do that with the int_view here. To make
so basically,
them
they all become just a view.
They all become the view type, exactly. Yeah. And then that should load once it's done compiling. Okay, so now we can go back over to here, load this, and I can wonder if it's saved again. Because we definitely changed things, right?
Yeah.
So come on now. Post rest gap. We return this. It's in the suspense. We've got a fallback. Should be right. Or maybe it isn't. Whoops. Let me puzzle about why that is for a second here. Or, I could just look at my notes and see what I got wrong. We've got our suspense. We've got our move. We've got our get. We're matching on it. Return the value just fine. So this component looks right. So maybe we messed up the function. Unwrap or default. So let's see what I did for that. Get post.
Oh. Did you ensure access to the state store? Well, spin would have been an arrow.
There's a default one because we we're doing something with the get post here, because this returns a sum. Unwrapper default, map error, get JSON, result option string. Interesting. Why did this one compile and this one? No, why did this one compile and this one wants? I've inverted the order and now it's screwing with my brain. Result option string server function error. We get the store. We get the post, which is, I guess we don't really need to define. Oh, this is the trouble, right? Because this get JSON is looking for the string type, but it shouldn't be returning the string type. It should be returning the option string type.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little bit of type erasure going on in there. Okay. So now we can probably go back here, wait for that to compile, and we should get handy dandy not found. Yeah. Yay.
Hey.
Right. So now we need to do the last step in our little process. We need to add a way to add posts, right?
Yeah.
So to do that, let's make a add post page. And pages mod, mod add a post. Close this and go back to add. So this is going to look a little bit similar to the one that we just did here. It's still going to be a component. It's still going to say add post. Still needs to return import into view, which is capitalized. And it's still, and because it's a function, it still needs that. Right? Yeah. There we go. Okay. Before we do that, let's, and for the structure, again, we'll create a view macro. We'll give it a h1, and we'll say add a post. And then if you're following along, you'll know that I haven't added a route for the post. So let's add one here. Route path equals, let's say, /blog/add.
Is there any meaning to the order of the routes? I assume no, since you're putting this below the wildcard, or the parameterized one, sorry.
There is no meaning to the order of the routes. The Leptos router will not allow you to have duplicate routes.
Okay.
So if they conflict, they'll throw an error. The Axiomantics servers also don't let you have duplicate routes. Mm-hmm. The other thing we could do, which I'm not going to do here, is we have a thing called nested routes. So you could create like a path, or sorry, a /blog parent route, and then put in like :slug and add and delete and whatever. But we're not going to do that this time.
Okay.
Actually, oh, I did name it a little different. In mine, I've got some of these in the same thing here. But we should be able to do this, and it should be happy. So let's go add a post. So you've learned about resource here. Now you're going to learn about resource's friend, the action. So a resource is good when you want to run an async function on page load and then rerun it if some things change. An action is good for mutations, for things that say you want to submit a form. You would use an action. So let's make an action here. And to do that, there's kind of a broader action called create action, which lets you use any async function out there to do this. But we also have a handy thing called create server action here. And server action lets you more easily integrate with our server functions, right? So instead of having to define all that stuff, kind of like we had to do with the resource, all we have to do here is put in the add post, the name of the server function we defined in the macro definition, and import it like so. And then this will give us, this is a function, right? Yeah, no, not like that, like this. And that will give us an action of type add post that's going to return the type that that server function returns. So you can see our server function return result nothing, server function error.
So quick, when so when to do what? When to do actions and when to do resources?
So I reach for a resource. They're a little bit interchangeable, but I reach for a resource when I want something to happen during page load. Like if I'm fetching some kind of data, that is a great use for a resource. If I've got, because a lot of those things will depend on other bits of data, and you can kind of configure that.
Yeah.
And action is great when you want to submit a form, when you want to trigger a mutation on something and get the return value of that.
Okay.
Right. And we're going to see that in a little bit here as we build out the interface. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So we've got our add post. Oops. Sorry about that. So now we're going to use another of a feature that I really like about Leptos. We're going to use something called an action form. For those of you who care a lot about progressive enhancement and Node.js environments, the action form is going to be, one of your best friends. Basically, what the action form does is it desugars to a regular form, and it easily integrates with an action, right? The only little odd thing here about the action form is that for this one, we want the function name of the thing, not the, we don't want the function name, we want the action name here. So we're feeding this action, the add post action, to the action form here. That makes sense. And then the way the action form works is that you feed it regular input fields with the name of the server function arguments, and it will automatically handle serializing and deserializing and checking and whatever other things you want across the boundary, right? You don't have to write a Zod checker to do that or do any other kind of thing. So add post takes a slug, right? And it takes a content argument. That needs to close. And so now we've basically made, almost. And because it's a form, we need a button.
Yep.
A submit button. Oops. Here we go. I don't know. We'll say submit. Sometimes we used to require you have your regular text in quotes, and now we don't. So if I did just the word submit, it should work fine as well. If I remember to close something.
Button
I'm missing
at
the
end
tag
of
on the
line.
end here.
Yeah.
There we go. But I often put in quotes just because it's muscle memory at this point.
Yeah.
So either way is fine. Rust Analyzer sometimes is a little bit happier with quotes, but it doesn't look like this time. Right? So now it's compiled. We've got our route.
Okay.
So now if we go to blog add, we have our form, right? I know they're not labeled and this is terrible design, but there's 2 input fields here. What can I say? I do CSS, but not usually in live demos.
We assume the left one is the slug and the right one is the content, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if we do this right, and let's pull up the inspector here to see how this goes, right? If we do this, you should be able to see that when we submit this form, let's say—
Are you able to zoom in the inspector as well, Ben, maybe?
Let's see if I can. Yes.
Cool, thanks.
Let's
so
see
you're basically
happens.
watching the network now, so we can see the server function calls.
Yeah. If we submit this here, oh, we got a 500. Why did we get a 500?
Well, I was excited that we actually saw a post. But anyways, we'll deal with the 500 now.
So the thing to realize, and this is kind of the magic of how server functions work, is that it will auto-generate a route for you. So there's an add post long number route at /API/ add this, right?
Yep.
And it will take the inputs that you set and it will return either an error or whatever you told it to return, right? And we got an error here. 500 is not what I was expecting, but that's fine. We've got a slug and we've got content. We submitted it. Oh, there's a Wasm trace here. Server function not found.
Oh, you still need to explicitly add it to the server RS file.
Exactly. This is another thing that I love to do to myself here, is that we have to explicitly register these.
Yes.
So let's add those in here. I'll put in add post and we'll put in blog. So you might be wondering why get post worked.
I am wondering right now. Yes.
Despite this. And the answer is that by default, right, when you first load the page, when a person enters a page in Leptos's SSR, it will run the resources as if they were regular Rust functions on the server. Okay. What register explicit does is it registers that endpoint, right? It adds it to the list of endpoints at /API, so that if they went to your site and they clicked on /about and then clicked on /blog/foo, like a link to that, it wouldn't load because that is a client-side route. By default, it will not hit the server again unless you refresh the page for the full rendering. So that's why that worked. And I guess
if we didn't do the server-side rendering piece of this, we would download the website and then try and go back to post and see if the block actually was there, right? And now, because we're doing things server-side, we sort of get everything done there before serving the not found to the client.
Right. So what happened here and what we saw in the network tab is that it made a separate request to get post. It knows the HTML that it needs for the page, but it was trying to get the post and it couldn't. So we'll add this here and I didn't import them. You have to import them. No, you don't. Why is this red? Oh, that's why, because I put it in the functions folder. Yes. Technically, you don't have to put this whole long thing in here. You could import them up at the top and then, just put get count here. But that seems to be the way Ivan did it at the beginning, and I've just kind of ended up doing it. So, whatever floats your boat. All right. So if we inspect this again, we're going to get rid of that 500. We'll load this here, and I'll get rid of all that stuff again. If I submit this, now I've got a 200, which is exactly what we need. And if you look at the response, it's null because it's the curly brackets, right? But if we go to /blog/foo, you have a post.
Amazing. Awesome. Whoa. Yeah, I mean, so this I really like I like how this has progressed, Ben. I've seen some earlier versions of some of this integration and things like that. And it was, for me, it was super exciting to sort of see the full end-to-end and the build-up and functions and posting and getting and all of that, getting it all together. I think one thing that may be good to sort of spend a little bit of time on, and I know we are even at 2 minutes over time right now, that getting the whole WebAssembly thing, like server side, client side, there are WebAssemblies all over the place. Well, we can't call them WebAssemblies, sorry. My CTO keeps telling me those are not called WebAssemblies, but WebAssembly modules are all over the place, right? And some are being served by Spin. We even have a WebAssembly on the server side that serves a WebAssembly to the client, but maybe we can sort of lay out the land of where are all those WebAssembly modules and what are the roles in this whole integration between Spin and Leptos. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is even just that it's an implementation detail, right? But I think it would be good to sort of at least get it mapped out a little bit.
I think that's fair. So on the server side here, so the way this kind of compiles out, right, is that on the server, it will compile Leptos to a WASI preview 1 module. So if I look in target debug, no, not target debug, target Wasm 32 WASI release, you can see that there's a Leptos Fermyon blog.wasm file. And that's the WASI server that Spin interacts with and serves your content, right? That's the secret sauce of Fermyon and Cloud. On the
this is where the API endpoints are hosted as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the server functions are basically baked in this WebAssembly module that Spin as the server serves.
Right. Exactly. And besides that, right, this is called server-side rendered. But if you know server-side rendered, it's not 100% server-side rendered. So like, I am running that again. So if we go to here, the difference between like a network call, for example, when there is JS and Wasm on the client, there's a client-side bundle. And when there is that bundle, we won't reload the page. We will make a GET request in that bundle to that server function endpoint and get the value back, right? A seamless-ish experience. But if there is no JS, if there is no Wasm bundle, then we use it's a regular page reload, right? It's a regular form submit. And all of that interactivity and state management and all of that stuff that you have to do kind of on the front end when people click on things, that lives in its own Wasm bundle. That one's a Wasm 32 unknown bundle. And that one is probably in, if I can remember where it put it. Right, that's where we put it. Yeah. In the target site package folder. And you can kind of see this one here has the same name, but this one is a different format and just has that interactivity bit, as well as a JS file to load it. Right.
And Spin's role in this is that, and I don't know if you can cat the spin.toml file, but that one defines two components that are running in the Spin server. Like the top one, there's one called component, the Leptos Fermyon block. That is the one that is serving the server-side functions, right? The APIs.
Right.
And then we use another component, which is called component PKG, I think, at the end.
Yes, that's the one.
Where we've actually implemented a file server in WebAssembly. And basically that file server is serving the site directory so that the client can download the JavaScript, the CSS, and the WebAssembly to be executed in the browser. So we have at least 3 WebAssembly modules at play here to get all this work. But it's WebAssembly all the way, right? And that's what we love about this.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots you can do with WebAssembly. I will note that Leptos supports something called client-side rendering, which is basically we shove everything into the Wasm 32 unknown bundle file and send that to the client, and you don't even need a server for that. So if we wanted to host that on Fermyon, it would just be, I guess, the file server, right?
It would just be a file server, but you would lose out of getting access to a key value store to save and retrieve your blog post, right? Which is part of the whole Spin framework implementation, to give you access to something like that, a SQL server. We even have inferencing and other pieces in there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. I know, Ben, we didn't get time to talk about this now, but I know you did some super interesting thing with even getting some tree sitter and syntax stuff working inside of the browser as well. I don't know if you very briefly just want to show this, and maybe we can save sort of the technical implementation for either another stream or a blog post, but just to sort of add a little bit of extra cream on top of the whole WebAssembly stuff we've been talking about.
Sure, let's do that. I definitely spent a little bit of time preparing this, so
and by the way, I'm just going to put the link to the starter template up here again. So if you want to try this out and build a blog site like Ben just showed us, you can go to the git.com leptos-rs start-spin, and this is where you'll find the Leptos starter template. And
2.92. It's being a little odd. Come on. There you go.
While you do that, Ben, I'm going to put another banner up because I have banners in this whole streaming system that's Zoeng created for us. So here's how you get to our Discord server. We have a great Discord server, and feel free to join that one and ask any questions about Spin WebAssembly. We'll be happy to help out. There's also a really good Leptos Discord server. I'm not sure I have the link to that one here, but I can find it and post it as well.
If you go to leptos.dev, which is our website, we've got a big link to it, I think, in the upper right-hand corner of the top of the page. So feel free to click on that and it'll get you right there. Yeah, right there. Give me a second here. It's compiling, and then I can show you. So for those of you who don't really know, I have a crate called FeeMark that I made for my blog, and a bunch of other people now ended up using, that'll take Markdown and compile it to HTML with syntax highlighted code blocks. And that with syntax highlighted code blocks was kind of the annoying part for me. So let's see if this loaded here. And recently I thought, hey, I want to have a better editing experience. I want to be able to see a live preview of my, did I forget my password? Yes, I did. Okay. I wanted to have a live editor experience, right? And to do that, you kind of need to load it into the browser. And it's somewhat difficult to load into the browser because it is both a Rust and a C++ package, because Tree Sitter is a C++ package, right? And neither of those things, especially C++, run super well in the browser here. So I was actually able to take my Rust C++ package and do like 7 different steps to get it into a WASI preview 2 components, and then transpile that so that it will run in the browser with like this cutting edge, just barely implemented stuff. Oops, not edit. I haven't changed the edit one yet. And then you end up with this, right? So on the left here, we've got hopefully working live content, not working live content for some reason. Well, this was working when I thought about doing this a little while ago. but basically you would see the output in the left. And for some reason, you're not seeing the output in the left.
I have seen this working in a video that Ben shared recently. And while I don't know if you want to give it a little bit of try, Ben, but I think something to wrap up the whole story about the Leptos and Spin integration is that basically the blog that Ben was building before, if you have a hosting platform for Spin apps, Fermyon Cloud being one of them, or hosting them in a Kubernetes cluster or running them on a server, basically spin up is the command you would need to run to host them locally, or you can use the deploy command to deploy them into one of those endpoints. And now you sort of have the full package of being able to serve whatever is needed on the client while still having the server-side functions hosted on the backend. And I think that's where, all of these things coming together and have a really great operational experience around it makes a ton of sense.
Well, this is what I get for not trying it before I came. So, yeah, it worked last night. What can I say? There is a little video of it that I can potentially share. It's in a Mastodon post and in the Leptos Discord if you want to take a look. But yes, it was a big issue. It took a while, and I'm going to write that up so that other people maybe don't have to experience that like I did. And yeah.
Yes, let's find we'll find the video somehow. I'm not sure where it is. Do you think we can find it?
I can do that. Let's see.
Oh, you have it here? We can add the post in.
It's on, like I said, it's on Mastodon, right? So I can just go to.
You can just show the video right now.
Here it is. Okay.
Yes.
And since this, I've tweaked the CSS a little bit, and it obviously looks a little prettier, but this is it actually working, right? We've got bold, we've got italics coming up here, and I'll add a code block in a second here, and it'll actually compile it and show it in real time. And
this WebAssembly module runs inside of the client, right? Inside of the browser at this point.
100%, right? This is... I'm going to turn that off. Yeah, this is running on the browser, right? No part of the server is required for this, which is great.
This is awesome. I love it. I mean, this is a great blog editing experience and shows another power of WebAssembly, what we can do there.
For sure.
Client side, for instance. Cool. We went way over time, Ben, but I think that's what happens where you're in good company. I want to thank you so much for joining us and for walking us through how you can build a blog with Leptos and using the Spin integration, getting all the server-side benefits and the client-side benefits of WebAssembly, and I guess Rust all the way, WebAssembly all the way. Love that.
In closing, I'll just say we didn't really get too many questions in there. If you have questions, the Leptos Discord is great. I'll lurk around there, and any of you want to turn up. I hope to see more Rust apps on Leptos with Spin in the future.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Ben, for joining. And next week, Tuesday, same place, same time, we'll have another live streaming coming up. And right now I'm blanking on what the topic is. But if you go to our live stream, to our YouTube channel, you'll definitely figure out what it is. Also in Discord, we will announce these events with the topic for next week. So thanks for joining, and see you again next week. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.